Hi, today I would like to talk to you about a realization I had a couple of weeks ago. What happened was I was invited for a webinar and it was really last minute. And a day before the webinar, I was invited to be one of the panel members because the subject was families who have lived or live with addiction, so a loved one who's addicted to either alcohol or cocaine, heroin, whatever, gambling. There were a few interesting members, and I want you to refer you to my Instagram and to find out a little bit more about that, because I don't want to talk too much about this webinar, but I do want to talk about a woman who then made me realize something. The lady is called Elizabeth, and she was really wonderful woman, and she had lost a son to heroin addiction. This lady also wrote a book about it, which is called Mom, Can You Lend Me 20 Quid? But the thing is, I started following Elizabeth, and I really admire her because she turned this horrible loss into something positive, because she created an organization, a charity called Drug Fam, and it helps family members of people with an addiction. So I totally applaud that. It's fantastic. Now, I also saw that Elizabeth got really a lot of exposure, really good contact. She really even was on television. And I think that's fantastic, because I think there should be a lot of interest in these subjects. It's just important to talk about. People should realize how slippery that slope is of addiction. However, I did wonder, why did I not get that exposure? And I do want to explain that, because that sounds a bit like, why not me? But what happened was, when I wrote my book my first edition of my book in 2011, it was published, and it was called back then The Hidden Voices of Alcoholism. Cheers, The Hidden Voices of Alcoholism. And there was in that period a request by the British government for testimonials regarding alcohol in general as a subject. So I sent them my book, and they used it, and my information is still this day on the parliamentary website. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's my way in. I can bring awareness to the subject, what alcohol does to family members. But also in my book, I also interviewed alcoholics and people who work with alcoholics. So it's quite a wide range of stories, because it's a storytelling book. However, that's not the point. The point is that the British government used my book. So I sent this information to all the newspapers and magazines I could think of in the Netherlands, and also the English magazines here in Spain, where I live, as I live in southern Spain, and I'm Dutch, that's why I sent it to the Netherlands. And I only got 2 reactions. One was a health magazine in the Netherlands, and she wrote a totally ridiculous story about why I fell in love with an alcoholic. Had nothing to do with my book, so I didn't even tell anybody that I was in that magazine. And the other one was a little British magazine here on the Costa Tropical, Costa del Sol, where I live. And they wrote, Dutch expat is influencing the British government, the British alcohol policy. And I would have thought that more newspapers and magazines would have picked that up, because it's kind of special, isn't it? But they didn't. And I spoke to a friend of mine, and she's in Canada, and she is a sober coach. She actually got rid of her alcohol addiction, and she now helps other women to also get rid of that addiction. And we spoke about this, and then she made a remark which then became a realization for me. She said, one of the things is, in my opinion, so it's still our opinion, that heroin is considered a very dangerous drug. And so heroin is the fault. Heroin causes the addiction. Alcohol, however, is not seen as a drug, and alcohol doesn't cause addiction. Is that true? However, that's what we are supposed to believe. And the drink industry also always puts this little sentence, you must have noticed that, drink aware, be aware of your drinking. So what they're actually saying is, if you're addicted to heroin, it's not your fault. If you're addicted to alcohol, then it is your fault because you're weak, you're whatever. So there's these mixed messages, and that's already very weird, isn't it? And I thought, why is there no interest in my story, the story of these people who live with people with an addiction from alcohol, because mine is especially for alcohol. And then speaking to Joanne's friend in Canada, we kind of thought that, yeah, alcohol is such a, there's that slippery slope again. For some people it's addictive, for other people not. Now I would argue that heroin might be a bit quicker to get addicted to, but I'm not even totally sure about that, but I presume so. But I don't think everybody who tries heroin becomes a full-blown addict. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think so. And neither with alcohol, obviously, but alcohol is so accepted and promoted in our social lives that it's very difficult to, if you have this addiction tendency, whether that's through genes or whatever the reason is, I mean, yeah, you can, that's a different subject. But it's not considered, I think, an interesting subject, because people who don't drink are boring. People who drink too much and get drunk and are all over the place are losers, especially when they're like alcoholics. And I think there's something wrong with that. I really want to know what you feel about that.